Hello guys, welcome back. Today in this video we're going to look at file operations and how we can operate on files using Python. So today's agenda is going to look something like this. So we are going to discuss about modes, and then we are going to see how we can write to files and how we can append to files, and then how we can read from files. And we are going to see a convenient way of working with files, which is Context Manager, using Context Manager. And then we're going to wrap the video up with an example. And in that example, we are going to copy an image using Python's file operations. All right. So let's get started. So before getting started, I'm going to show the current file directory that I'm working in. So this is the current location that I'm working in. I don't have any files within this directory except for this sample data folder. You can ignore that. We don't need, we're not going to need this. Apart from this folder, we don't have anything else, right? So now let's get started. We have the modes. Okay, so when you are working on files, any file using Python, we have three different modes in which we can operate on it. First one is read mode, which is denoted by R. Second one is write mode, which is denoted by W. The third one is append mode, which is denoted by A. And we'll see how all these three are different. The names are self-explanatory, but we'll see how to actually work with that. So first of all, we're going to see the write mode, which is denoted by W. While working with files, when working with files, you need to open the file. Okay, so when you open a file using this syntax, open of file name, comma mode. So this is the syntax how you open a file. I'm going to open a file text.txt in write mode. All right. Uh, and this is going to return a file object to me. Okay, so whenever I try to open any file, this is going to return a file object upon which I can do all the operations that like writing and reading and so on. Okay, so as you can see right now in this current directory, I don't have any file named as test.txt, but I'm still trying to open the test.txt in write mode. So what happens is that whenever you try to open a file which is not there in write mode, whenever you're trying to open a file in write mode which is not there, it will automatically create a new file with this particular name, and it will store it in the current directory. Okay, so let's just see what happens. Before running this, let's go over all the lines that are there in this particular cell. So I'm opening a file which is test.txt in write mode, and this is going to create a new file as test.txt over here in the current directory. And then I'm going to write two lines to it. Okay, so first line is hello there, followed by new line character, and then second line is how are you doing, followed by new line character. Okay, so if you notice here, I'm trying to open a file, I'm getting the file object, and then I'm using the file object to use the write method on it, and passing in that string that I want to write into the file. Okay, so I'm writing two lines, hello there and how are you doing, and then I'm printing out a few properties. Okay, so these two are methods of the file object, and I'm printing out a few properties of the file object, like file name, file mode, and is the file closed or not. Okay, we are going to see what these things return after we run this. And one important thing that you have to remember while dealing with files is that whenever you open a file object and you perform all these operations that you want to perform on it, it is very important that you close the file object. Okay, so when you're done working with that file object, it is always a safe practice to close the file object. Otherwise, you'll run into some memory leakage errors. All right. So I'm done with working all these operations, and I'm closing the file object at the end by using the method f.close. And you can check if the file is closed or not by accessing the property f.closed. Okay. Now I'm going to run this cell, and we're going to see the output. All right. So I have run this cell, and if I refresh the directory structure here, I see that I have a new file called as test.txt. And now let's just open it up and see what's there in it. There we go. We have the two lines, hello there and how are you doing. So since I added the new line character, we can see that we have the two lines in two different new lines. All right. Um, Now let's look at the properties that are printed for the file object. So the first property that is printed like f.name, this returns the file name that we have created or that we have opened up. And the second one is mode, which is write mode. I have opened the file in write mode, so that's why I'm seeing the word W here, which denotes write mode. And I'm printing f.closed. So f.closed actually returns true or false, depending upon whether your file is closed or not. So until here, the file is not closed. Okay, so that's why uh, it is returning as false. But after I close the file, if I try to print that out again, this time it's showing that it is true because I have already closed the file. The file object is closed, and the f.closed is set to true. So this is a convenient way of checking if your file object is closed or not. Now, moving on. So that is how you work with files. Moving on. So this is another example that we're going to see here. This time I'm trying to open the file one more time using write mode, and then this time I'm going to write I'm good, how about you, and then I'm finally closing the file, which is very important. Okay, and now let's see the contents of the file after I run this. Okay, I'm running this command and I'm refreshing the directory, and I'm trying to open the file again. And this time, if you see, it's showing I'm good and how about you. But the previous lines that were there, previously when we ran the cell, we added hello there and how are you doing to the file. And I'm again adding I'm good and how about you. But the previous lines are erased from this. Why is that happening? So what happens is that whenever you try to open a file in write mode, it refreshes the file. It resets the file. It empties out the file, and then it adds whatever you are adding, whatever strings you are adding to it. Okay, so when I try to open the test.txt in write mode, it actually cleared up the entire file that was saved before, and then it created a new test file, and then it added these two lines into it. So what if I wanted to add these two lines, like instead of erasing the previous data and adding the new data, I wanted to add new data to the existing data, to the existing file. So for that, we have the append mode. So in append mode, so here I'm just creating that file again. So I'm just adding the hello there and how are you doing lines to it. And if I try to open it up, you can see we have the hello there and how are you doing lines stored in test.txt. And now I want to add these two lines to the existing file. I don't want to erase the previous data. I want that previous data to be there, but I want these two lines to be appended to the file. This time I'm opening the file in append mode, and I'm writing these two lines to it, and I'm closing it. And if I run this and I try to access the test file again, this time you can see that we have the two lines which are I am good and how about you appended to the previous text. So like that, you can append the values, you can append the data to the existing file instead of erasing the entire file. Now let's see how we can read from files. There are a lot of ways that you can use to read from files. So the first step is to open the file in read mode. Pretty obvious. And then to read from file, you can use a method f.read, and you can store the values that have been returned from f.read method into any variable, and you can print that variable out. Okay, so what this does is it reads the entire file, whatever the content whatever content is present in the file, it reads the entire file, and it returns to the data folder, the data variable. And if I print the data variable, I should see all these four lines of the file printed out down below. And there's another way of reading the data in files. You can use a read lines. So what this does is it reads all the lines in the file as a list of strings. Okay, so I'm going to get a list of each line. Okay, so I'm going to get a list of strings in which each entry in the list is going to be hello there, how are you doing, I'm good, and how about you. So I'm going to get four different items in my list. Okay, and now let's just see how that goes, and finally I'm just closing the file at the end. So if I print this out, we can see that printing out the data by calling f.read, we got the four lines over here. But when I call the f.read lines and print out the data from it, I'm getting an empty list. I'm not getting any data out of here. Why is that so? So there is very simple reason for that. So how the file object actually reads the data is that Imagine a cursor, okay? So it has some sort of a cursor. When you open up any file, it has a cursor at the beginning of the file. And when I call any read method, that cursor moves one character by one character, and then it returns that data to the variable which is receiving the data. Okay. So when I call the method read, the cursor actually travels through the entire data and it returns the entire data to the data variable, and I'm printing it out. But when I'm calling the read lines method one more time, what happens is that this time the cursor is at the end of the file and it is not at the beginning of the file. And when it tries to read lines from the end of the file, there is nothing to be read over here. And that is the reason why we are getting an empty list instead of getting this data. That is because we have already read the file, the cursor is at the end of the file, and we don't have anything else to read from here. And that is the reason why we are getting the empty list. Now to rectify that, to rectify this problem, what we can do is we can move the cursor back to the beginning and we can again perform all the read operations that you want to perform on the file. And to move the cursor from to any position in the file, we have a simple method called as seek. So I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm opening the file in read mode. I'm reading the entire file. And now, before reading the lines, this time I'm moving the cursor to 0th position of the file. So cursor was here after we read the file, and I'm moving using this method f.seek of 0, and this which moves the cursor back to the 0th position of the file. And from here, I can use the read lines method to read all of the lines and get the list of strings as output. Okay, let's just try it out. So there you go. We have the data printed and we have moved the cursor back to the beginning and we have read the lines and we got the lines in return. We have hello there, how are you doing? I'm good, how are you? So we have all the four lines printed out as follows. That is pretty good. Now we're going to move to another example. So instead of moving to the beginning of the file, we can also move the cursor to any position in the file just by passing in the position of the file in the arguments. Okay, so previously we moved the cursor to the beginning of the file, which is position 0, but this time I'm moving the cursor to the position 8. And now let's just see what happens here. So instead of reading the lines, I'm just going to read again. Okay, just going to read again. So there you go. Uh, First of all, I read the file, entire file, which moved the cursor to the end of the file, and then I'm seeking it, or I'm moving the cursor to the 8th position, which is somewhere around here. Okay, so I'm moving the cursor to the 8th position, and from there, if I call a read method again, the data is going to be read from this position to the end of the file. So that's why you're seeing only this message from ERE of hello there till the end of the file. So that's how the seek method actually works. And if you don't want to like read the entire data, or if you don't want to get the entire list of lines from the file, and you want to just get one line by one line, one after another, you can simply use the method read line, which will return one line after another as many times as you call it. Okay. So if I try to run this, you can see for the first time I run this, I get one line which is printed hello there, and the second time I run this, I get the second line which is how are you doing. All right, and you can call it again and again to get all the lines which are left in the file. Now, instead of doing that, if you don't want to like call this method again and again, you can simply use a for loop to iterate through all the lines in the file. And it is very simple. You can simply be like for line in f print line, and that is going to iterate through the all the lines that are present in the file. And this is another method that I want to show you of reading contents from a file. So instead of reading the entire data, and if you want to just read some certain number of characters, you can simply pass that number of characters inside the arguments. Okay, so let's say when I open the file, the cursor is at the 0th position, and from that position, I only want to read 10 characters of the file. I can simply pass a number 10, and it will return 10 characters from the file. Now let's just see. I'm taking the data of 10 characters, I'm reading 10 characters, I'm storing it in data, and I'm printing it out. And I'll talk about this method after I run this. cell. Okay, there we go. Now you can see that we have printed 10 characters. That means that it only read the first 10 characters, which is hello there without the E and exclamation, and it returned it there. And what the f.tell method does is that it gives you the position of the cursor, okay, the position at which the cursor is uh, actually placed after we have done our read or write operations on the file. Okay, so since we read only 10 characters, the cursor is at the 10th position because we read from position 0 to 9 and the cursor is at the 10th position. So the f.tell is returning 10. All right. So that is how you read, write, and append to files. Now we are going to see a very convenient way or recommended way of dealing with files, which is using the context manager. So usually when you're when you're writing a very huge program, people usually forget to close their files. Okay, when you're dealing with very huge programs, it is actually very difficult to remember to close your files accordingly. So using a context manager in this case is very helpful because a context manager looks something like this. Okay, so we use this syntax with open of test.txt and the mode, which is read mode, as f, and whatever operations that you want to perform on the file object f, you can perform those operations. You can write that code within the with block. Okay, so I'm using a block which is a context manager, and I'm writing all the code, like I'm trying to iterate through all the lines in the file object f, and I'm printing them out, and then I'm trying to see if the file is closed or not. So how this works is that as long as you're within this with block, within the under this with block, indented under this with block, the file is open. And as soon as you exit from the context manager, as soon as you exit from this with block, the file will automatically get closed. The f.close method will automatically be invoked, and you don't have to bother about calling the f.close method again and again after you're done dealing with the or working with the file object. So I'm checking if the file is closed within the context manager once, and I'm checking if the file is closed after the context manager or outside the context manager. And let's just see how this works. So you see I'm printing out all the lines, which is returning all these 4 lines. And the first f.closed, which is within the context manager, is returning false because the file is not closed yet because it is still under the context manager. But after the context manager, like outside the context manager, if I exit the with block, I can see that the file is closed because the f.close is returning true. So you don't have to worry about calling the f.close method again and again whenever you have opened a new file. All right, and that is how context managers work. And to wrap this video up, I have an example. So in this example, what we're going to do is I'm going to download an image. Okay, so as you can see, we don't have any image on our in our directory. So I'm just going to download an image. Don't bother about this code. I'm simply downloading an image from the internet. All right, there we go. We have an image. If I try to open this up, let me close this test.txt. There we go. We have an image with this simply a Python logo. Okay. Now what I'll try to do is I'll try to read this image, which is image1.png, and I'll try to copy it into a new file. That is, I'll create a new file and I'll write the contents of the image1 into the new file. Okay, into a new image. So this is simply a copying operation using file operations. So what I'm doing is, first of all, I'm using context managers and I'm opening the file in read byte mode. Okay. So remember, the images are not simple text files that you can simply open in read mode. Images are a series of bytes. Okay. They are simply nothing but byte sequences. So you need to open them in read, which is RB. Okay. So when you're dealing with any images or any object kind of data, you need to open them up in RB mode or WB mode. Read byte mode is okay. Now, so first of all, what I'm doing is our intention here is to read from the file image1.png, read all the data from the file image1.png, and then write it to another image called as image2.png. So what I'm doing here is that I'm opening image1.png in read byte mode as image1, and then within this, I'm again opening a new file, which is image2.png in write byte mode, which will create a new image for me. So if you remember, write mode or write byte mode creates a new file if it is not present in the existing directory. as image2. Okay, so I'm creating the second file object as image2 in a write byte mode, and I'm performing the first operation, which is reading the data from the first file, which is a first file object, which is the image1. I'm reading all the data from image1, storing it in the data variable, and then I'm taking this data and I'm writing it to the second file object, which is image2. So simply I'm doing image2 dot write and passing in the data that I read from image1. So this should, after running this, I should see another. So if I refresh this, you see there is no image2.png. After I run this, I should see another image with the name image2.png and having the same image as a image1.png. Okay, so let me just run that. Yeah, I have run this cell, and if I refresh this, I should see another image, image2.png, and this also has the same image as image1.png. Now you can perform the same operation on files as well, any text file or anything that you can work with, and you can perform this sort of copying operations or cut operations or in any file operations that you can think of. All right. So that is it for this video, and I'll see you in the next video.